So then let's start with that. I think that's a good, clear path to use is like, what's going on right now in in your state. And then let's kind of morph that into leading through a crisis, because I think that's applicable to anyone, anywhere.
Okay. And how deep do you want me to? Well, I'll just chat with you about it. Like you
Yeah,
could say,
let's talk
okay,
about
so
that.
what's going on with all the storms out west?
Yeah. And then we can talk
And what's
about,
your role?
yeah. So yeah, we'll ask you that. Like, yeah. So, like, I think that's how we'll kick it off. And then that's where we can talk about then, you know, this is what we have to prepare for, the thing. We don't know what that thing is. And then
Yeah.
that's where you and I can talk about whatever.
Yeah. Okay.
All right.
The Hollow Buddy. And we all feel hollow sometimes.
Greetings and salutations, and welcome to the Hollow Bunny Leadership Podcast. I am Kristen Zeman, and I am here with my effervescent co-host, Sylvia Moyer. Hello, Sylvia.
Hello, Kristen. It's always super exciting how you're going to describe me each time. Sometimes I'm effervescent.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes I think I'm delicious. I don't know.
Yeah.
You've
You're
described
always
me.
delicious. Always delicious.
A little delicious nibble. Yeah.
Yeah.
So welcome. What
I
a
like to
fan.
mix up the adjectives every once in a while. So,
It's good.
for our listeners, for our bunnies out there, for our solid bunnies.
Yeah.
So as everyone knows, or perhaps our millions of listeners know, is that
Mhm.
we're a couple former police chiefs, but this is not a podcast for cops. This is just about talking about life and leadership between the two of us. Sometimes we've got some cool guests on,
Sometimes
and sometimes it's just you and me, right? Today, it's just you and me.
it is just you and me because we got life. We have life to talk about. And a lot of folks have said, hey, give us an update on what's going on. So,
Yeah.
Kristen, you are phenomenal in the way that you have taken your experiences as a police chief and you've taken them on the road. And your real passion now is talking to folks about how they lead, how they might mitigate active shooter scenarios, the here's what, so what, now what about active shooters and a number of other things. Where have you been lately? What's going
Yeah.
on?
Well, so I took, the month off of December, and that was kind of cool because, I got to regroup. And also, we talked in our last episode about the crisis comfort. And I'm going to be honest with you, I had a little bit of a crisis because there wasn't a lot going on.
Okay.
And so I had to work through that. That was actually kind of rough for me because I'm used to traveling every week and, going different places. And
Mhm.
so I had to really confront that discomfort of being in one place, which I'm not very good at because I struggle with that restlessness.
Sure.
But what it did affirm for me, that since retiring from my 30-year police career, is that where I need to be is talking to organizations and, about not just leadership, but about preparing for the unthinkable. And that's what I've been doing, which is why I want to ask you. You have a lot going on in your state. Crisis can be anything from a mass shooting, like what happened in my city, to, I don't know, a pandemic or to a natural disaster. And I know that you're going through some stuff there in Marin County. So talk about that. I mean, you are now the undersheriff of Marin County, where you are leading through a crisis as we speak. So what's that look like for you?
Well, I like that you call it Marin County. It sounds
Is it Marin?
It's Marin, but tomato. So yeah,
I hear it both ways. Oh, well, thank you for the correction. And I'm sorry, you Marin County residents.
There are going to be thousands of them that are going to say, we got to talk about
Ooh.
that.
Yeah. Should we edit that out so I don't look like a booby?
Yeah, we've got a really super producer that can probably help you with that. So,
or you know what? Or we just call it a gaffe. I misspoke. How did I pronounce that wrong?
I don't know. Seriously,
Okay.
there are particular people that will get spun out on it, but I think the rest of us will just give you grace. So here's the deal. So It's a really interesting space to be in, because leadership has, as an activity, and with all the principles and traits and all the things that we bring into our leadership experience, right, and how we show up, there are some really interesting things that I'm learning. I have not led in a space with custody, a jail, and all the intricacies of that, and caring for incarcerated persons and that whole system. The coroner division, totally new space with the kind of puzzles and mysteries that those incredible professionals really dive into. And courts. It's really interesting, above and beyond the other traditional stuff that I've led in municipalities. Well, the thing that I'm comfortable with is the incident management system. And I was on an all hazards incident management team. So I super love, love, love emergency operations center and the whole incident command structure. I love it because it gives us a framework in order to, have reporting elements and real lanes that we travel, and then, reporting elements, a certain number of people. And anyway, but it's new to me because I haven't had an operational area that has a coast. Marin County is on the cool side of the Golden Gate Bridge. We have mountainous terrain, real cool topography, the bay, and then on the other side of the mountain we have the ocean. And so I'm fascinated because I'm learning about high tide and how 8 inches of rain on Mount Tamalpais at high tide is a recipe for disaster. So I'm learning a whole bunch of new things, and I'm also leading in a way that recognizes stress, both operational, organizational, and personal stress of the people in which I engage with. So that's all been really, really fascinating.
So let's pause right there and explain to some of our listeners who
Mhm.
may not be in emergency management and law
Yeah.
enforcement on the fire side. So what you said is indicative of preparation. So you mentioned ICS, which is the Incident Command System.
Yes.
And so that is so important because, and that's why I want to touch on that. This is what I go around speaking about, is preparing for the unthinkable. And again, you don't know what that thing is coming, that thing, the boogeyman coming to your organization.
Yeah.
And so what that
Mhm.
incident management is basically just a structured breakdown of leadership, who is in charge. And like, for example, in the mass shooting in my city, I assumed incident commander along with the fire chief. So it became unified command. And all that means is that, he was taking charge of the medic side of the house, and I was taking charge of the law enforcement, the critical response on the police criminal side, right? And the reason that matters is because it sets the structure for leading operations. And we see organizations that do not follow that command structure, and what happens is complete
Chaos.
and utter chaos. Now, an incident, a serious incident looks chaotic, but when you are running the incident command structure, it's actually organized chaos.
Yeah.
And so organizations can learn from this that are perhaps outside of the realm of first responders, in that you can set this preparation, what we call it, a threat matrix, call it whatever you want. But when the boogeyman shows up, not if, but when, how are you going to handle it? Who's in charge? Who's in
Sure.
charge of operations? And so I think it's important for our listeners to really to think about where they are in their lives and their organization, and determine, if something were to come to my organization and threaten it, are we prepared for that? So I just wanted to pause there, so if people didn't know what that
Sure.
was.
Yeah, so let's kind of tease that apart. Even in listening, people can envision this. We have what's called the planning P. It's this P that has very clear steps, and that's for the kind of event that we know is occurring. It's coming to us, and it's different than what you're talking about with this emerging threat, Kristen. It can be a planning P for a tornado, some act of nature. It can be for a large event. Incident command offers for us that there's an incident commander. There is with four key and central commands. There's the logistics. They do all the getting of the stuff, bullets and beans and toilet paper and food and all that stuff, all the stuff that you need. There's the operations section. That's the people. That's the stuff that goes out into the field. There's the planning and intel function. Those are the people that plan. They do the advanced planning for the next operational period. The intel people, they take a whole bunch of information, cultivate it, churn on it, and turn it into intelligence, which is different than information. And then there's the finance and admin. Those are the folks that are tracking how much is it going to cost for wood, for sandbags, for equipment, for lighting, for workers' compensation, for all of the stuff we have to order. And then those elements report up to an incident commander, who has also a press information officer to keep the community informed, to keep the media informed, a safety officer, there's weather people, and there's all kinds of folks that come to bear in a large incident. In the field, it's super cool because you identify who's doing what, and reporting elements. There's this really cool thing that you basically don't have more than 6 individuals reporting to one person. That's about the span of control that one person can kind of has a capacity for. So there's in the field kind of incident command, and it can expand and contract with that incident. And then there's something like the Emergency Operations Center. Whoo! It's sexy in Marin County. It is the
Not Marin County.
not
Not
Marin County, because I don't even
in
know
Marin
that.
County.
In Marin County.
Where in the F is that? Uh-huh.
Uh-huh.
Can I just make a comment right now?
Yeah,
You just totally nerded out there, and it was so sexy. It was so sexy the
yeah.
way you talk about emergency management.
Mhm.
I was gripping my chair. It was that sexy.
Right.
Not
And
many
so,
people can make that sexy.
Kristen, we all have our gifts, right?
Okay, but listen, you just said something about expanding and contracting, and this is so
Yes.
important in the middle of a crisis because you have to be able to adapt to the crisis at hand for as
Ooh,
small. And so
yes.
that's one of the things when I go around speaking is, are you adaptable? Because as
Yes.
we know, no two crises are crises. Is that crisi? What's the plural of crisis? Crises.
Crisis.
No two crises are exactly the same because
Right.
you have to be able to pivot. And I know, in the incident that you're going through is like, you gather that intelligence and then you assess the situation and then there are actionable items and then you go. But it is so important that you have this framework ahead of time, because if you do not have the framework ahead of time, then you are going to fail. It's simply
Or,
put, you're going to fail. It's
or,
going to blow up. Something will go wrong,
yep.
and it will be an epic failure. And so I just think that's so important. I love that you just walked through it in that sexy way, but it's so, so crucial for organizations to really take heed.
Right. And I got to say, the firefighters, Fire Scope, and all, they're the ones that perfected this.
They're good at it.
They
Yeah.
are so good at it. And the
Yeah.
cops, we were slow to figure it out because
Yeah.
we're like the canary in the coal mine. We'll go in, and I will say that fire goes in, they do their thing, and then they rehab and they
Yeah.
demob and they do all these things that really ensure that they are healthy. We go until we are about to drop. And
Yep.
so the really interesting thing is it requires a degree of discipline to stay in your lane. Everybody in the emergency operations center has a vest. They have their vest. It says like communications branch or whatever their role is. They have each person has a term. They have a role. There are forms. There are all kinds of things, and it sounds super bureaucratic, but the sexiness is you stay in your lane as an individual to fill the collective. And I've known folks. I had a friend that when we got really into ICS, he actually organized his daughter's wedding using ICS. He
Yeah.
goes, okay, I'm the IC. My wife thinks she's the IC, but I'm the IC. And
Yeah.
he really organized it in a way that gave him a framework to be successful, and then gave specific roles to people without making it super weird. They filled their roles and it was successful. So this is not only, and what I'm engaged in, I think there's a couple things that are really important. I want you to speak to the distinction that you talk about so brilliantly between notification and communication. I want you to do that in a second. And also, I want to say that there are the men and women in Marin County sheriffs. They come to work ready. They
Mm.
serve. They are ready for the long haul. And the organization is built in a way that we have bunk rooms, we have a laundry facility, we have a gym and showers, and folks can stay for the long haul. And we have a full kitchen. It's really remarkable because the expectation is, with all the natural and man-made threats that are before us, we have to care for the people who care for people.
For sure.
And
So let's unwrap this. I'm going to surmise that this incident is not the first time that you have seen this. And what I mean by that is there was preparation ahead of time. There are
sure,
tabletops.
sure.
There are experiential training, scenario-based training. And the reason that that's so important is that it's not enough just to say, all right, we've got, this incident command structure, but now you have to practice it because we
Well,
know that you play like you practice. And when you put your people through that kind of training and you try to speculate, okay, what is next? And the way that we did it is we always had, like a mass shooter, but then that wasn't just it. Once people started getting comfortable working through, that crisis, then we tossed like
right.
a bomb threat 3 blocks away, right? Just so then people had to regroup and under that kind of duress, but it's in a controlled environment. So I want to underscore there that when that incident shows up in your city, in your organization, it shouldn't be the first time that you have practiced the crisis. And that's very important about preparation.
Right. And mindfulness is part of that preparation because it is being present with the unfolding experience.
Yeah.
And so there's that. And I do still want you to tug on that thread of notification communication after I say this, that something that's remarkable is the men and women that do this work. Also, they're not only engaged in this higher order of preparation with this weather event and the catastrophes that are occurring around this weather event, people, the mudslides, people being totally dislodged from their homes. The men and women have to have a care and consideration and compassion for those people. Imagine how devastating that is, right?
Oh
And
my
and
gosh.
there are people that are being evacuated. We have to communicate with a wide variety of people in Marin County. It's so robust, the service that's provided and the safeguarding. I also want to say this. There's also somebody whose bike just got stolen. There's someone who just got into a crash. It is the worst thing that's ever going to happen in their life. They've
Yep.
just had a loved one have a stroke or a seizure. They need care. And
Yeah.
so, where we have multiple crises, there is a necessity for us to show up. To
Yeah, I
show
love
up.
that. Yeah, for sure. So yeah, I'll touch on the communication versus notification. It's something that I wish I knew
Right.
where it came from. I'd love to think that I made it up, but it's kind of my trademark. But I honestly don't know where it came from. But for leaders in an organization, it is very easy to notify. That is to say, this is the policy. Jump how high, right?
Yeah.
To put forth orders, and I will argue that there is a time and a place for that kind of notification in the middle of a crisis. You don't want people saying, "Why are we doing this?" That is the time when the defecation hits the oscillation, when orders are being followed. But let's go back, and communication is the key into the preparation and into the most important aspect of these crises in any organization, your people. When your people understand, number one, the operations, when you give them the skills and the tools, you know Daniel Pink wrote the book Drive, and it's about what motivates people. And he identified 3 key components. What motivates people are: 1, autonomy. People want to be able to do their job without being micromanaged, right?
Right.
2, people want mastery. They want to become experts. I mean, when's the last time, you said, hey, are you good at your job? And people, who says, no, I kind of suck at it. That's not what we want.
Right.
People want to become masters. And then the third component of that is they want a purpose, something,
Yeah.
that they're aligned to, right? So our job as leaders is number one, to provide them the autonomy. And that means to trust them to do their jobs.
Yeah.
But you cannot trust them without building skill. I mean, that's where that trust comes from, is trusting yourself that I have the skills and the ability and the talent to carry out
Sure.
this job, right? And
Sure.
so it is absolutely about people. And so that's where the communication comes in, is that, let's all brainstorm what's the worst thing that could happen. And that's what I lead all my presentations with, is I want you to sit and wherever you are, and you think about where you work, what is the worst thing that could possibly happen? And don't limit yourself to the things that have already happened, because that's easy, right? I mean, mass shootings, natural disasters, but really put yourself out there, use your imagination, and then let's communicate how we would handle that. Let's walk through the steps. And so that's really what that is about. And then, as you mentioned, the most important part, and when the incident is happening, and even actually it's post incident when it's most important. In the middle of an incident, you're not going to be able to communicate. You're going to have to notify the public, you notify your stakeholders, your people. But then after the fact is, okay, now what happens next? What are the next steps? What has happened? And how does this affect you? And that's where that communication is. And then most importantly, taking care of your people, because these helpers, the ones that the first responders that show up, they are the ones who are putting their lives, and not an exaggeration, they're putting their own lives at risk to save people, to keep people from harm. And so it is those people who are charged with the caring of the community. We as leaders have to take care of them.
Right. And preach, sister. And I have to say, so many people have said, so what do you do in the emergency operations center as the undersheriff? I'm like, I don't do anything. I show up.
That's
Right.
right.
And
Pause.
humility.
Pause. Right there. Sylvia Moyer. Leaders show up.
Yep.
Carry on.
Humility is not passivity. To
That's right.
stand in a humble place and show up does not mean we are passive.
That's
So
right.
many of our peers get wrapped up in, what do you do? What are you doing? What actions are you taking? And so sometimes the greatest leadership activity you could do is to be inactive.
Yeah.
But be
So
present.
that's so interesting, and this has become a common theme or topic, as it
Okay.
were, when it comes to leaders' response to crisis. And I can tell you with great confidence that in the middle of my mass shooting, I was not the person who was the operation incident command. Or I'm sorry, I was running operations, but I was not the one with the action. That is my SWAT commander. He knows far more than I do, and for operational tactics, that's the word I was searching for. Is that tactics?
Sure.
It is my job to organize. But I'll tell you what, there are more. I may have the highest rank in that particular incident, but the people who have the better skills are the ones who are managing the internal
Right.
perimeter and going in and doing the grid search of the shooter who is still at large, right?
Right.
So
Right.
so you don't, and I think that's maybe where the misnomer comes in, is that the person who is the highest ranking has to know the most, and it's just couldn't be further from the truth. As you show up, and the way I see it is, I'm there to carry the water. Tell me what you need so you can perform your duties to the best of your ability. That's where that mastery and autonomy comes in, is what do you need from me so that you can fulfill those duties?
Sure. And it's so interesting because that is as important as actually having the skills. It's developing that ability to just be and to empower. This is what I was just talking about this past week. Centralized command, decentralized execution.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Perfection right there.
And
That's it.
and so the command is centralized, the execution is decentralized. And so it's interesting because the men and women in the field have to know that the command is centralized, the mission is laid out, that the all of the pieces will come to bear to support the overall mission. They have to understand their piece. Someone told me that everyone in an organization should have a clear line of sight between what they're doing and what is the overall mission, whether it's
Mhm.
a cubicle, an office, a desk, a console, a squad car, or whatever. To have a clear line of sight between what we do every day and the mission is
Mhm.
really what people need, and that requires communication. That requires an understanding of what we are trying to achieve, and
Mhm.
so there's a real necessity for us to communicate and to describe that for folks and then to clarify it. I mean, in the emergency operations center and getting through this weather event, I mean, think about this. We activate the emergency operations center consistently for weather events. That wasn't common some time
Mhm.
ago, but we're recognizing that there is value in having centralized command
Yeah.
in that way and bringing up kind of up staffing and having everyone communicate, notify, and have a structure for if it turns bad, we
Yep.
can rapidly adjust, rapidly shift because we are ready.
Yeah, and there's a problem solving that has to be
Yeah.
built into the training because, again, not everything is going to unfold as you predict or as you trained. And
Oh,
so
come on.
there has to be, a mechanism to stop, assess, regroup, and then, and then act. And so that's pivotal. But I love what you said, and I want to really I want to extrapolate this out because I can tell you throughout my 27 years sworn, there were many times that I went through training where I rolled my eyes and was like, really, again, we have to go through this training again. And it was so interesting that after our mass shooting, a couple of the officers said, you know what? Every time we go through active shooter training, every time we go through this kind of experiential training, I'm like, really, again? And
Yeah.
they said, after this incident, I will never roll my eyes at training again because, and you said, whether you're at your cubicle, what happened that day in my city is that everyone did the thing that they were trained to do that
Yep.
was fitted to their skills, talent, and their ability. And they performed flawlessly on that day because they had
Yeah.
done it so many times. And so we have a tendency, to roll our eyes that we got to go through this again. And I really want people to pay attention to that preparation because it may seem mundane, it may seem cumbersome, but you need to walk through the ICS training, the operations, and what your role will be, so that you can perform on that day. And that's where that mastery comes in. And again, why leaders have to make sure we give our people the tools, because if they don't have the tools and even the abstract tools of decision making, we have to also empower our people. So there were many times during my incident where I found out later that someone stepped in and did a thing that really that wasn't their assignment, but it needed to be done. And so there's an empowerment piece in there too, where
Oh,
you don't have to ask permission. Don't wait and run it up the flagpole. If something needs to be done in the middle of a crisis, you just freaking do it. And that's what happened that day as well. So we also have to build, that's where that autonomy comes in that Daniel Pink talks about, is people need to be able to do their jobs and we need to trust them to do it. And that's why we put them in the positions.
I heard someone say, hey, let's distinguish mastery and perfectionism.
Mm.
And that's
Oh,
kind of what you're talking about, right? Because
yeah. Retweet.
if we're focused on perfectionism, how does one ever achieve that? So distinguishing mastery and perfectionism is really, really important. And there's also this really interesting thing around courage, right?
Mhm.
Courage and the courage that it takes. What did Churchill say? Um, Fear is a reaction. Courage is a decision. Isn't that
Mm.
what he said?
Yeah, I love that.
And so choosing courage, choosing to take the initiative in a
Mhm.
crisis like you've just described. Courage is knowing what is right, knowing what's needed, and taking the initiative, even if it's outside the bounds of what is your specific role or job in an incident like you're describing in a crisis. That's okay.
Yeah. But, you know, what builds, we talk about courage and bravery and all of those things, but I'll tell you what builds that is that when there's that hesitancy of not acting, that failure to act,
Okay.
what we oftentimes find, it's a lack of confidence because there is a lack of skills. And so when you build skills, you build confidence, which then builds, I think, courageousness. So I don't know. What do you think about that?
Well, I don't think it's far from kind of the standards of reason.
Hmm.
Skill building can also increase one's confidence, right? And
Hmm.
I think that's what you're arguing. I
Yeah.
also think it has to be paired with development.
Hmm.
Education is development. So developing the whole person and developing the ability to discern, developing the courage. It's not the fear, absence of fear, but it is clearly saying that I'm going to assess this. I'm
Hmm.
going to apply the skills that I have, and I'm going
Hmm.
to use the courage that I have cultivated and the confidence in order to take the requisite action. So,
Yeah, I guess what I'm saying, I'm trying to unpack what's in my head. So I guess what I'm saying is, let's think about it this way: is that there are different types of people. Now we tend to look at first responders as being
mhm,
people of action, right? But arguably, innately in us, there are different responses that Homo sapiens take. One is fight, the other is flight, and the other is freeze, right?
okay,
And so here's what I'm arguing. I'm arguing that courage can be built, because if you get
yes,
someone who
yep,
is thrust into a situation where there is a mass shooter, or insert any crisis here, right? If you have not been trained, you are going to do one of those three things. You're going to fight, you're going to flee, or you're going to freeze, but you don't
yes,
know what you're going to do. You can say, I hear all day long, oh man, if I was put in that situation, I would run towards that gunfire,
right,
right? And I'm like, oh honey,
okay,
because you don't
that's
actually
huge,
know.
right,
Yes, that's why I don't think everyone should just be given a gun, because everybody's like, a good guy with a gun. Well, you don't know how that person is going to react.
yes,
So I guess what I'm trying to say here is that, and you kind of hit on it, is that skills can be built. Is that what you don't know exactly what you are until you are tested in that moment. And so when you can build the skills by through scenario based
yeah,
training, and that's also mindset, right? Is that I will go in and I will do the thing. And that's why first responders are a very special breed. People often say, I'm sure to you, as they have to me and to many law enforcement and firefighters, is I could never do what you do. Yeah, you're right. That's exactly right. Because some people just can't, or what wouldn't want to run
right,
towards
and
gunfire, right? So,
how lucky are we that
yeah,
we found it and we have the skill, the desire to do it?
yeah, and that's what I'm saying, is I think that you
Yes,
can take a person that maybe does not have that courage or bravery, and you can build that through skill. So it is something that you can build. If you don't have it, you can build it. I guess my hypothesis.
yeah, and I wrote this down. Perspective is the way you see the world. Mindset is what you think about what you see.
Yeah.
Chew on that for a second. Perspective
Mm-hmm.
is the way you see the world. Mindset is what you think about what you see.
Mm-hmm. Well, so how do you apply that to action?
Action is the way that we see the world is often influenced, right? Or
Mhm.
um, it may be innate. Mindset is what we think about what we see. We have
Mhm.
the ability to discern, to look at an environment, a micro terrain, a macro terrain, situational awareness.
Mhm.
That's a big deal. Situational awareness is understanding the environment that we're in. The mindset is what we think about what we're seeing right before us,
Mhm.
how we
Okay.
are interpreting the environment that we are in order to apply our skills, and who we are as first responders, our duty that's driven into us, that's really part
Mhm.
of who we are, but it's also reinforced the
Mhm.
humanity that all of us approach our duty with, hopefully. And that is what really governs how we take action.
Mhm.
There might, well, we may not want to dive into this pool, but there's also this condemnation about the action that we take. And there's a paralytic effect that some people are reporting based on the condemnation of the actions that are taken in policing. And we,
That's why I think that training is a necessity, because you do not rise to the level of the expectations, you fall to the level of the training. So then when you
yeah,
put your officers, your firefighters, first responders through that training, then they're going to play like they
mhm,
practice. And so that's where then that's why I think that is, what leaders need to do, is make sure that they have the skills, because
yeah,
once you have the skills, you're less apt to make errors in the field that are going to be criticized later. And I have found that the headlines that you typically see, especially in law enforcement, are because these officers were not trained well. And so they didn't know what to do, and they failed in that man versus moment. When they are figuratively tapped on the shoulder and asked to do that thing, they have failed. And as a result,
mhm,
that's where lawsuits come, and where life is taken, and if they're not adequately trained. So, that's probably, like you said, a whole other, a whole other pool to dive into. But,
yes,
you
that's
know, yeah, crisis
well,
management, though, is really about readiness. And no matter what that is for you, look at all the organizations that thrived, or learned to thrive during the pandemic. And I'm not talking about policing. Let's put public safety
yeah,
aside. Is that it was those organizations that didn't know how to pivot, that folded, right? But then you had organizations, let's call it, a restaurant that said, okay, we can't eat inside, so this is a crisis. This is our bottom line. We have to,
mhm,
feed our employees and their families. So what are we going to do? All
yeah,
right, let's do curbside carryout. And so they pivot. And so the organizations, the companies, and businesses that stayed afloat during the pandemic were able to take a crisis, apply that incident management, and say, okay, here are the operations, here's how we're going to pivot, and this is how we're going to deal with the crisis. So you can apply that preparation to anything.
without a doubt. And you and I have talked a lot about comfort, choosing courage over comfort, choosing choosing to be present with the circumstance, the discomfort, the pain in which you're in, the courage to show up, even if you
Yeah.
don't know what the outcome is going to be like. That is where leaders
Yep.
emerge.
Yep.
So,
That's a
so
good
you're
place to land this plane. That's a good
yeah,
place.
yeah.
Uh,
So I think we do land the plane. I think if our listeners are really to think about this, they think about what planning looks like for their environment, what
mhm.
planning and preparation looks like for their leadership kind of space. What are the things that they can and should do to get ready and stay ready so that when it hits the fan, they have a
Mhm.
level of courage, they have a level of competency, and a level of, um, I guess, well, I'll just say that leadership grit, that
Mhm.
readiness. What do they need to do to be able to show up when it hits the fan? Planned
Yep.
event, there's a lot more time, but it does take some cerebral stuff and some courage. The emerging event relies on all of us, or we are relied on to show up in a way that reflects that we have the training and the development, the skills, the courage, all of that to really take the leadership leap.
Absolutely. Yep. And I think that's the most important thing. If you are a leader, the most important thing, that the gift that you can give your people, is our skills, and then allow them to apply those skills in that autonomous way, and then care for your people. It's about compassion. It's about loving your people more than you love
Yeah.
your position.
Yeah, and compassion is a practice. We're not born with it.
Absolutely.
It is a
Absolutely.
practice. It's something that we have to cultivate. So
Well, Sil, you filled my bunny today. Thank you. When
you
you when
feel
you nerded out, on ICS, you filled my bunny today. Yeah,
you
you did
know,
it.
someday I'll draw the boxes for you, and ooh,
Oh my
then it gets
God. Do
super
you
sexy.
mean it? Do you mean
So
it?
I do. I commit to it.
Wow. So you would draw all of the ICS boxes?
I
That
would.
would be
I
amazing.
would.
Wow. At our next cocktail party, I'm going to have you do that like on a napkin and I'm going to frame it. Okay.
I'm here for you, no matter
Okay.
what.
All right. You're my favorite bunny, Sil. You're my
You're
favorite
my
bunny.
favorite bunny. You are solid, sister. And I have to say, also, I say this often, but it bears repeating. What you are doing in getting out of your comfortable life to go into environments to really challenge people to think, to tell your story repeatedly, and to describe that entire event, and then your commitment from turning that tragedy into something super meaningful is remarkable, Kristen Zeman, and we are better because you do that. So,
Thanks,
anybody
babe.
wants you to speak about this in whatever environment they're in, whether it's policing or corporations, whatever, how do they get a hold of you? How do they do that?
Wow, that's amazing how you just teed that up. Wow, you can find me on KristenZeman.com.
Okay. Well, you're laughing, but somebody might just ask, and why leave them wondering?
You're absolutely right. And I'll tell you what, if you invite me to speak to your organization, I'll wear a bunny suit. I don't even care. I'll do
Don't
it.
promise what you won't deliver.
I love you hard, Sil.
Love you big, sister.
And thank you to our millions of bunny listeners
And
out
Ted
there.
Madden.
Thank you so much for tuning in. This podcast was produced by Ted Madden, and the song you're about to hear is written and performed exclusively for our little podcast by my handsome and talented son, Jake Zeman, and his friends, Fabian and Zoe. If you love our podcast, please subscribe. Really, right now, just stop, click that subscribe button,
Do it.
like it, review it, retweet
Tell
it, repost it, do all the things. If you don't like it, just move along. Just
Move
move along.
along.
Nothing more to
No-
see here.
Nothing
Yeah.
to see. Keep moving.
Yeah. Yeah. Melted bunnies. Just go. Go. Bye, everybody.
Bye, everybody. Thank you. Go out and lead.
When you look inside, what do you find? Are you content to fall behind? When you lose your way and you've lost your why? Have courage and get ready to fight the hollow bunny. When the way ahead is covered in smoke and you're tired and you're scared and you're losing hope, you'll open your heart and your eyes to see a challenge and a question. Why not me? To fight the hollow bunny. And we all feel hollow sometimes, but the monsters are only in your mind. It's a tough pill to swallow, but if you're brave and kind, you'll be alright. If you fight the hollow bunny. When the challenge ahead scares you to death, you tame the imposter inside instead. To change the world, you've got to start small. It takes a leader to say, I don't know it all. And I know I'm gonna fall, but I'll pick it up and come back stronger, failing forward